you are, you are presumed to consent to the recording and the use of your voice or image. Thank you for that. So my name is Jeff Hill. I'm with the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation. Today we'll learn about the Joint Office's public EV charging playbook and hear from other guests about their work on community-level EV planning. Time allows, as I mentioned, we'll follow that up with some audience Q&A today. Today I'm joined by an esteemed group of panelists. I'm joined by Lauren Reichelt, Caitlin Bope, Brian Boer, and Alana Wilson, who will discuss their work in developing strategies and playbooks for EV planning at your community level. For those of you not familiar with the Joint Office, our mission is to accelerate an electrified transportation system that is affordable, convenient, equitable, reliable, and safe. Our vision is really a future where everyone can ride and drive electric. So the Joint Office provides support across several main federal programs for electrification and other zero-emission transportation priorities. We do this through outreach, through analysis, through policy support. Perhaps most importantly, we do this through our technical assistance program. The Joint Office is really the front door to the federal government's transportation and electrification efforts. And our technical assistance support is where most people, including you on this webinar now, interact with us. Whether you are a state DOT looking for a sample RFP for your NEVI program, a transit provider looking for battery electric bus routing tools, or a community looking to develop an EV readiness plan, we are here to meet you wherever you are in your journey and help you towards your goal. You can learn more at our website here on the site, on the screen rather, driveelectric.gov/communities. Across all of our TA programs, our technical assistance programs, we offer a variety of resources from webinars such as this, reports, help sheets, and various toolkits. These are all designed to meet the challenges we've seen in agencies and the industry face, from big cities to rural areas to tribal nations. Our EV Playbook, which is one of our newest and most exciting offerings, which you'll hear more about shortly, is probably the most cross-cutting across all areas of all the tools and resources we provide. So I'm very excited to see this presentation. And for those of you who need help beyond these static reports and tools, we offer a concierge assistance. If your transportation electrification problem has you stuck, or your program needs are so complex you don't know where to start, please do reach out. As the old infomercials used to say, operators are standing by. We really are just an email or a phone call away to help give you the support you need to get you going. Some of the past support we have offered includes things like EV readiness planning. You'll learn more about some of the background on that today. Our infrastructure siting, workforce development, equity analysis, which you'll hear about, and community engagement. Even things like energy analysis and working with your utility, which we know are common issues many of you face. Please feel free to let your constituents or that you work with, the industry that you partner with, or do reach out at any point if you have questions or concerns. We can be reached via our contact us page. We know it looks somewhat generic, but I promise you someone is checking this inbox regularly and ready to route your questions to the appropriate expert and assist you. If you haven't signed up for our newsletter already, please do that on our contact us page. I suspect that's how many of you found your way here. But if you haven't signed up for that, please do sign up for that there. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my esteemed colleagues here, Lauren and Caitlin.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. We can go to the next slide here. Perfect. So the public EV charging infrastructure playbook originated from work that took place actually within another DOE program, the Clean Energy to Communities Technical Assistance Program. So I'm going to share a little bit about that history before handing things off to Kaylin to show you the actual playbook. Next slide, please. The EV infrastructure playbook, like I said, started with work that we were doing under the Clean Energy to Communities program, or C2C. C2C provides innovative, cross-cutting technical solutions to municipalities, tribes, utilities, and community-based organizations across the United States with the goal of helping them identify and implement solutions across clean power, mobility, buildings, and grid. So it is broader than transportation, but transportation is one part of the work that we do under C2C. So what makes this program important is the portfolio approach. It's designed to include 3 different entry points for communities within the C2C program framework. So the goal there being that we increase access to just the diversity of community types and capacities across the United States. So those 3 offerings are in-depth partnerships, peer learning cohorts, and expert match. In-depth partnerships are multi-year engagements. We only work with a few communities in that way. Cohorts are a medium-term commitment where NREL convenes about 15 entities around a single clean energy topic, and they receive expert teachings and coaching and lessons learned and best practices from peers. And this is the one that we're mostly going to focus on because this is really where the playbook came from. The third one is expert match. It's the easiest access point in C2C. You can apply to receive 40 to 60 hours of technical assistance from National Lab experts. And that can help you overcome a pressing challenge or tackle a near-term opportunity, whatever is most important to you in that moment. So like I said, the EV infrastructure playbook resulted from one of our peer learning cohorts. So we can go to the next slide. A little bit about, oh, all right. A little bit about this cohort. So we facilitated a 6-month cohort on planning and funding for EV charging infrastructure deployment. Could we go back one slide, please? Okay, sorry. I thought I missed one in there. So this 6-month cohort, we opened applications for 6 weeks, we reviewed those, and we down selected to 15 local governments to participate in the cohort. And the goal was to help them understand the really important considerations related to public-facing EV charging infrastructure and to help them conduct some activities that would actually lead them toward the makings of a strategic EV infrastructure plan. Next slide. So that cohort covered a series of topics related to public EV charging infrastructure over the 6 monthly workshops. So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the Clean Cities and Communities Partnerships. This is different from C2C. The Clean Cities and Communities Partnership, which is down at the bottom of this slide here, is a network of over 75 coalitions that work locally in urban, suburban, and rural areas around the United States to support stakeholders in developing affordable, efficient, and clean transportation fuels and technologies. So we actually brought these coalitions in to work with our cohort participants between the cohort sessions and take cohort learnings and best practices from these large group workshops, large being 15, but still group workshops, and use them in their local context to advance their own EV infrastructure planning process. So these local teams we sort of created were given a set of tools and templates and resources to conduct activities on behalf of those cohort participants. As we started getting into the cohort, we realized that all these fantastic tools and templates and guidance and resources that we had developed could really benefit a lot more entities than just the 15 in the cohort, and could be really useful for local jurisdictions across the entire country. So simultaneously, the Joint Office was seeking to develop similar technical assistance on a broader scale, and we really connected the dots at a really opportune time to create the public EV charging infrastructure playbook, using the resources that originally were used in the C2C peer learning cohort. So that's a little bit on the history. I'm going to pass things off to Kaylin now to give you a little bit of a lay of the land on the playbook itself.
Awesome, thanks, Lauren. And in the chat, I'm going to post a link to the playbook itself if you want to click on that and follow along or check it out. Again, my name is Kaylin Bope, and I work at the National Renewable Energy Lab, and I support the Joint Office providing technical assistance to communities. This playbook provides interactive resources to help communities plan and build the infrastructure needed to support a zero-emission transportation system. Communities, planning organizations, local and state governments, tribal nations, and other decision makers can use the public EV charging infrastructure playbook to navigate key considerations for planning and deploying EV infrastructure. All the The modules include guiding questions, videos, worksheets, and additional resources to drive local progress. Modules can be followed in the order presented, but also used as a standalone resource to help with specific priorities. Next slide. Modules are self-paced. So again, you can go in whatever order works for you, but this is the suggested order for putting a plan together. It draws on extensive world of knowledge and existing resources created by the Joint Office, Department of Transportation, Department of Energy, the national labs, and many other vetted organizations. The playbook scaffolds all of this information into a stage structure and pairs them with activities and examples from real communities at each stage. So if you were to go through all the modules and complete the activities, you should have everything you need to put together, a draft EV readiness plan for your community and get started on a project. Each module has 1 to 4 activities, 3 to 4 videos from real communities or subject matter experts, as well as a searchable library of related embedded resources for that module. So I'll describe each of these modules in a little more detail. Module 1 provides resources on how to begin and work through the planning process for EV infrastructure. So the resources will help conduct a baseline assessment to determine future infrastructure needs and create a planning process and timeline to do that. Module 2 provides resources on how to effectively engage community members and stakeholders around EV infrastructure plans in your community. Module 3 provides resources to guide the determination of how and where to deploy EV charging infrastructure. These resources can be used to develop strategies for EV infrastructure build out on both public and private property. Module 4 provides resources to help determine potential costs of proposed EV chargers, as well as how to identify available funding resources. Module 5 provides information on how state and local governments can facilitate the adoption of EV-friendly regulations, as well as streamline the approval process for EV charging infrastructure projects. Module 6 provides information on how building codes, parking ordinances, and zoning ordinances can influence EV infrastructure planning by creating design standards, EV parking minimums, or allowing EV charger installation as part of zoning ordinances. Module 7 provides resources on how to develop approaches to EV charging infrastructure ownership structures and procurement strategies. And finally, Module 8 provides information on how to help you think through the important considerations related to fees and revenue for EV chargers. Next slide. So here's just an example of the content included in one of the modules. So this is the first module, developing EV infrastructure plans, or the planning module. This module provides resources on how to begin and work through the planning process. Activities in this module include guiding questions, an EV readiness plan template, guidance for conducting a baseline assessment, which also links out to some really great tools from the national labs, such as EVI Pro Lite or EVI Road Trip, and instructions on how to download additional data sets specific to your state for information on EV and EV charger projections. There's also a template to map out your community's planning process and timeline. The 3 videos in this module range from about 10 to 18 minutes each and show specific examples from 3 communities who have created EV readiness plans. One of these examples is Brian from Montgomery County, who'll be joining us in a few minutes to talk through kind of his experience with this. And lastly, there's a library of relevant resources, including a list of links out to example EV infrastructure plans from other communities, as well as links to other planning tools and resources. For example, there is a fact sheet on how to embed equity into community EV readiness planning from the JUST Consortium, and we'll hear from Alina Wilson about that a little bit later. Next slide. So each module has 3 components to it. There are activities, videos, and resources. So I'm going to dive into each of those a little bit more. And so you'll see those same components in each module. Each module has 1 to 4 activities for your community planning team. These are all downloadable as like a Word document or your spreadsheet, so you can have those kind of on your own computer and edit them as needed. Every module, the first activity and sometimes the only activity is a list of guiding questions. So, and then maybe 2 to 3 other activities. So this is really the participatory part of the module, really doing the work. This is a great place to get your planning team together and sit down and discuss as a group to make sure you're aligned about what needs to be done at each step, and also really understanding the local conditions for your community along the way. So, and making sure you're aligned and have the same understanding on that and prepared to go through each of the modules. So the guiding questions can help you make a timeline also to do this work and prioritize goals and actions along the way. So in this example on the screen here, these are just 3 examples of guiding questions from module 4. But when you download the whole document, there's actually 17 questions. So just want to give you a flavor. Next slide. Up next, we have the video component of each module. Videos range from like 5 to 20 minutes long. There's about 2 to 4 per module. You'll see speakers from the National Renewable Energy Lab, World Resources Institute, Clean Cities and Communities Coalitions, Joint Office staff, as well as speakers and planners from real communities across the US. Some of these videos were custom made for the playbook, and others are cut snippets from past Joint Office webinars where we had an SME, a subject matter expert that was speaking to a relevant topic. And some of these come right out of the C2C program. So you'll see that here in the videos on the screen that directly relate to the content in the module. So for example, a couple of videos, module 3, the siting module includes a video from Dr. Alex Epstein, a researcher at the US Department of Transportation Volpe Center, about a market scan he did for solutions for multifamily charging. Module 4 includes a video about how to successfully secure funding for your project by the Yellowstone Teton Clean Cities Coalition. Next slide. And the last component of each module is a resource library. This is a searchable library of relevant and vetted resources for that module. There's, I think, a range of about 7 to 30 resources per module. This is something that will grow and expand over time. And within each module, you can search and sort them by different tags like equity, tools, case studies, and other tags by module. I think there's over 125 resources in total throughout the whole playbook. So resources include external reports, external or internal reports, guidance, maps, tools, case studies, models, best practices, and example plans. So if you ever get kind of overwhelmed by all of the amazing resources out there and great work happening, this is a great way to sort it into how it relates to each step of the community planning process. And you can find resources that are relevant to you. So if you're looking for a specific topic, this can help you do that. Some of the sources for these resources are, again, World Resource Institute, Department of Energy, Department of Transportation, the national labs, Clean Cities Coalitions, but also Atlas Public Policy, the Center for Sustainable Energy, the White House, US Access Board, and other great organizations doing work in this space. And of course, the Joint Office. All right, so I'm gonna attempt to do a quick demo of the playbook so you guys can see it in action. All right, so hopefully you guys can see my screen here. So here is the home page of the Public Electric Vehicle Charging Infrastructure Playbook. At the top, you'll see all the modules here in order. And if you were to to that module, alternatively, you can hopefully that didn't happen. And you guys can still hear me. So you can click on them individually, or you can scroll through them and see each of the modules. Just within each of them. To see the various components, you just click on the gray headers here, and that'll take you to activities, videos, and additional resources. So walking through just a quick example here, let's say you're a community and you've done a lot of the EV planning process related to engagement, siting, funding, policies, and regulations, but now you're ready for procurement and putting together an RFP. So heading to the procurement section here, first you might check out the guiding questions in the activities component and make sure your team is ready to dive into this effort and you're aligned on what approach is best for procurement. Second, you might watch a video on ownership approaches for public EV charging, and then watch a video from the state of Ohio to learn about the RFP process they put together for the NEVI program. They were one of the first states to release an RFP, so that's a great video to hear from their expertise. From there, you might check out additional resources for model RFP language, example RFPs, or how to conduct outreach to minority-owned businesses, or learn about workforce development. And then last, you might download this questionnaire here. I'll share that, which will, in the activity section, to help gather and organize preliminary information to build an RFP for EV charging infrastructure. So great resource here that walks you through step-by-step putting together the information for an RFP for your community for public EV charging infrastructure. All right. That's the demo. Thanks, Jeff. And hopefully that was a good walkthrough. And up next, I think we'll hear from Brian. Thank you.
Thanks, Caitlin. Thank you, Lauren. If you all have any questions for that, do drop your questions into the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Brian.
Thank you, Jeff. Hi, everybody. My name is Brian Boer. I'm the Senior Planning Specialist for Zero Emission Vehicles with the Montgomery County, Maryland Department of Environmental Protection. Montgomery County participated in the C2C cohort program last year, along with the Greater Washington Region Clean Cities Coalition, and we got a lot out of it. We were in the process, while we were in that cohort, of working on our EV infrastructure planning at the time. And so it was really useful to use these tools to make sure we're asking the right questions and including the right level of detail in our plans. You can jump to the next slide. So, electric vehicles are really important in Montgomery County. We have a climate action plan that's looking to really aggressively reduce greenhouse gas emissions, with the understanding that a large part of that reduction in emissions is going to need to come from electric vehicles. And we think we have a really strong story about why electric vehicles are so important that we use when we're talking to members of our community and policymakers here in the region. Recognizing the pollution reduction benefits, the lower cost of ownership, and the convenience of electric vehicles. So we like to start with why EVs are so important and useful to people in their everyday lives and the benefits they provide. Next slide, please. And so as we get into this planning process and really start thinking about this first module of understanding how we're going to develop this EV infrastructure plan, we want to have clear ideas about the objectives that we have and the barriers that we're trying to overcome, and look at the strategies we're going to use. And the worksheet around that EV infrastructure plan was really helpful in making sure we're getting the right information in this process. And a big part of that is estimating how many EV chargers we're going to need and where, what the market for electric vehicles is likely to look like in the coming years. Next slide, please. And what we've seen is EVs are coming, and they're coming very quickly here in Montgomery County. Montgomery County leads the state of Maryland with about 30% of all registered EVs in Maryland are in Montgomery County. And over the last 12 months, we've added 10,000 new plug-in vehicles to county roadways, and that is equal to about 25% of all newly registered vehicles over that time. We track this data month to month. We have projections to see sort of where we're tracking relative to our goals. And at the beginning of this year, we saw, you can see here on the chart on the right, that the number of new vehicles, so EV sold, was a little bit below trend in the first part of this year, but we're back up over trend with the highest month ever in July. So we see this EV revolution happening at the pace. Next slide. And if you project this out, sorry for the formatting trouble here on this slide, but if you project it out, you can kind of look at where we're going in sort of the green line at the bottom, and then where we want to go. We need to accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles in order to meet our climate goals. The state of Maryland also has goals related to the Advanced Clean Cars 2 program, which is encourages more EV sales in the state. But Montgomery County wants to continue to lead the state, so we're targeting adoption at even higher rates. And if you project that out, you can see there is, we were at 20,000 in 2022. We're 36,000 registered EVs on the road today. And we may be upwards of 300,000, 400,000 by 2035 if we continue at this trend. And so that's going to mean we're going to need a lot more infrastructure. Next slide. And so we use the EVI Pro Lite tool, just the web-based version, to estimate how much infrastructure we're going to need. The default assumption in that tool says about 97% of EV charging is going to happen at home. But we know that 50% of the housing units in Montgomery County are multifamily units or townhomes. And we understand from some of the outreach that we've done that this is one of the areas where we need we're charging, at-home charging is a lot more difficult to build and implement. So these projections here assume a lower percentage of drivers have access to home charging, 70%. We found that the EVI Pro model is very sensitive to that input specifically. So this may be overestimating right now how much infrastructure we need if we're able to get more home charging installed. But looking at the total number of level 2 ports we'll need, total number of public level 3 ports we'll need, we need to increase public charging infrastructure quite a bit, as well as focus on how to increase multi-unit dwelling and private workplace charging. Next slide. So one thing to look at is where the registered electric vehicles have gone. And between July 2022 and July 2024, you can see the concentration of EV registrations has really increased throughout the county, especially focused on the sort of the western part of the county, where we know that we have higher income residents, a lot more access to single family homes and at-home charging. And in the places where we see EV registration hasn't kept pace, hasn't increased as much, those are definitely where we see a concentration of multi-unit dwellings and our more lower income populations. Next slide. So, thinking about the engagement step of and module tool and engagement, one thing that we did was we put out a survey. And we asked people to suggest sites where they would like to see community charging. We looked at that map again. As we also asked about certain goals of community charging, what people wanted to see, what sort of features were important to have at a site, such as lighting and things like that. And then we can map these suggestions against the existing charging network, look at other factors like EV sales. So we've created this interactive map where we can track this data, track our proposed charging sites, track equity-based geographic areas, census tracts. And we use this as a decision-making tool in terms of site selection and deployment strategies. We still have work to do on the engagement side. We need to do a lot more in-person engagement, meaningful outreach to communities. We've started to do some direct outreach to common ownership communities, condos, townhomes associations, to really understand what their specific barriers are, understanding that every condo community is a little bit different. So that's the next phase of our engagement plan. Next slide, please. I mentioned, our equity-based census tracts. We know that the Justice 40 tracts are there, but we can also look at some of our locally or regional planning organizations have some other different indices. They look at some slightly different variables. So those are equity focus areas, equity emphasis areas. But looking at these as a whole, we see a pretty clear picture of where the equity need is, and we can make our site selection accordingly. Next slide, please. And these icons are a little small here, but what you're seeing here is what we did in terms of site selection and using the worksheet from the playbook is we identified county properties as well as other public properties from non-county based organizations such as our public school district, our parks organization, other public facing organizations in the area. We also work closely with local jurisdictions. We have some independently incorporated local jurisdictions within the county that we've been working very closely with. And so we've identified those properties. We've identified where they are relative to equity-based areas. And we have also looked at the kind of charging that would be best suited in that area, the speed of the charging, level 2 or level 3, and made some proposals based on to the various grant programs that have been available, specifically the CFI program, Charging and Fueling Infrastructure program, as well as the Carbon Reduction program. And we've also looked at ways to make certain county properties available for the NEVI program to be leased to private contractors and selected through the state. So this map just gives you a sense of the many properties that we've identified and proposed for grant programs. And conditionally, we learned that 2 of our sites were selected as part of the Maryland NEVI program for fast charging sites. So conditionally selected, we're working through that process now. And hopefully we can turn as many of these blue and orange dots green as we can over the next months. Next slide, please. So, I think just to wrap up, these tools have been super useful in making sure we're focusing on the right thing. The next thing, and I, coming back to the playbook and the way the website is organized, all these tools are so easy to find. So I'm really excited to dig into it for the next step, which in our book is starting to think about procurement. And putting out either task order or RFP. We have some contractors under contract, but we need to think about how we can make sure we scope the right project for what we've proposed. And really looking forward to using these tools more and more as we go forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. And again, for anyone who has questions for Brian or for Caitlin, do drop those in the Q&A below. We'll get to those at the end. And with that, I want to bring up Dr. Alana Wilson with the Just Consortium. Alana, there you are.
Yep. Thank you very much, Jeff. Hi, everyone. My name is Elena Wilson, and I work at the National Renewable Energy Lab. NREL is part of the Just Cross-Lab Equity Consortium, along with Argonne National Lab and Berkeley Lab. The Just Consortium is working to advance equity in electric vehicle charging deployment and other clean transportation investments. We work with the Joint Office to provide equity technical assistance through research, resource development, and partnerships. So the next slide shows an overview of Just Lab Consortium efforts. that include conducting research on emerging equity practices in EV charging deployment and clean transportation investments, including how NEVI state plans and Justice 40 metrics can advance equity in this space. We've gotten feedback from external equity experts and are delivering technical assistance through the channels on the right side of this figure. So the next slide shows the many publications that are available on our website related to the themes of our work, which really are synthesis of approaches for incorporating equity into clean transportation, analysis capabilities, and input from equity and community experts and related help sheets. Many of these resources are also linked from the playbook. The next slide is some major insights from 5 published case studies of projects that are advancing equitable access to electric mobility across different modes. And so some of those main takeaways include respecting every community's culture and time, co-designing projects with communities, engaging communities with the intent to use their input, and then being able to communicate back to them how their input was incorporated. It also includes empowering community members with decision-making power and implementation roles, and using funding and flexibility to support these efforts. We've also done a lot of work on Justice 40 metrics and how those metrics apply to EV charging infrastructure. You can find our report as well as those previously mentioned case studies on the Just webpage. One thing I want to highlight here as a central theme in our work that probably doesn't come as a surprise to anyone is that members of low-income, marginalized, or otherwise disadvantaged communities are less likely to own personal vehicles, and those that do may not have access to EVs for some time to come. So advancing clean transportation equitably means investing in electrification of different kinds of modes. And so examples and case studies that we've looked at include transit, micromobility, and ride hailing, and just ensuring that the electrification transition is accessible to everyone. And so the next slide is just a link to that website, the Just Live Consortium page on driveelectric.gov, where all those resources are posted and where we are continuing to add new content. So pivoting to the EV charging infrastructure playbook, this is a resource that doesn't put equity in a silo. So on the next slide, I'm gonna reinforce the demo tour that Kaylin gave earlier by highlighting places in the playbook to go to for equity-focused content and showing how those equity considerations are really incorporated throughout the different modules. So one place to look in each module is those guiding questions in the activities section. For example, in the planning module, one of the guiding questions there is about how the plan for investing in EV charging fits into your area's holistic transportation plan, and whether these investments can help address any other needs or concerns that have been identified through your regional transportation planning processes. In the siting module, there's a guiding question about leveraging EV charging station investments in ways that can benefit multiple modes. So the next slide is a screenshot of what that looks like in the playbook. So you can see this example is in the engagement module in the activities section, and then that first link in all of the activity sections is those guiding questions. Another playbook capability is the additional resources section of each module, where those resources can be filtered by category, including equity, as Kaylin showed earlier. And so the next slide is a screenshot of that. With the equity filter highlighted, you can see that that pulls up different resources, including one of our Just Live Consortium publications down there at the bottom. And so the last thing that I really want to highlight from the playbook is that the engagement module in particular has a lot of equity relevant content in the guiding questions and the additional resources sections, as well as an interactive engagement planning worksheet. So that engagement planning worksheet looks like this. You can see that it's got prompts for thinking about engagement with different types of stakeholders. And so those stakeholders are the different rows in the spreadsheet. And then those question prompts are the columns. And some of those prompts include thinking through potential negative impacts of the investment in addition to the benefits. And so then the last thing I'll highlight here in the engagement section are the videos in this module. These are great examples from several Clean Cities and Communities coalitions. These are coalitions that have been focused on energy and environmental justice in their work. And the videos are good examples of how these coalitions are taking a more holistic approach to clean mobility. And that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Elena. And thank you all for participating in today's webinar. I think we have some time for some Q&A, so if you haven't already dropped them into the chat, please do so now. And I would ask all our panelists to please hop back on your camera if you don't mind here, and let's field some of these. Kaylin, if you don't mind, I'll start with you when it came in. So for communities that are seeking funding for EV charging, how are they using the playbook to get a proposal and plan development? Can we talk through that for a minute? Because I think for those of you who didn't see it, I'll drop a link into the chat here. We released the second portion of the first round, if you will, of a new portion, I should just say, of CFI today. $520 million went out today. Communities of all shapes and sizes won money to put infrastructure into their communities and along their corridors. Kaylin, how can they use that playbook to do that, to unlock those dollars for themselves?
Yeah, great question. So I think as many folks probably have realized, if you've looked at these funding opportunities, that by the time you're applying for funding at the state or federal level, you really need to have a pretty specific plan in place of not only how many chargers you're applying for and how much money that will cost, budget for that project, but what kind of chargers and a maintenance plan for those chargers, where the chargers are going, why they are being located there, who will be using them, how will the community benefit from the chargers. I'll point out that the program Jeff was mentioning, CFI, as well as several other federal funding opportunities, now requires something called a community benefits plan to be included in your proposal for funding. So that community benefits plan is where you as a community explain not only how this project will benefit the community and how you will engage them on this project, but also who you've already engaged and how you've already consulted the community. So this playbook, I think, really, all modules 1 through 8 can help prepare you to submit a really successful funding proposal. But in particular, modules 1 through 4, the planning, engagement, siting, and funding modules will kind of help you pull all that material and information together to understand kind of baseline conditions in your community, understand what you're looking for, where they're going to go, what kind of equipment, and really consulting the community each step of the way. Following those steps and having that process, I'm not guaranteeing anyone funding, obviously, but I think it'll help put together a good proposal and help you be more successful.
Thanks, Kaylin. Brian, coming to you next here. In Montgomery County, do you look at utility distribution infrastructure and capacity as part of your planning stage, or does that come later in the process? And that was the question that came in, but I'll expand on that a little bit. Can you just talk about fostering that relationship with the utility? Because I think for those of us coming to this work from transportation, that is sort of an unknown process for us, how we engage that. So any lessons learned in that?
We definitely look at the utility capacity. Our local utilities have a capacity planning map, so you can actually see on the map where there's availability for 480 volt 3-phase power. So we use that primarily to double check that the sites that we've identified for fast charging are actually viable for fast charging, without the need for new distribution infrastructure around there. We have also had engagement with our utilities. We have a good working relationship with them, but we haven't necessarily gotten to the phase of having them evaluate our specific site proposals. I think waiting for funding confirmation, waiting for some things to actually start talking about the details and the timeline of implementing these sites. But at least from the standpoint, it's really useful to have this interactive GIS map from the utility to look at where there is 480 volt capacity.
Great, thanks for that answer. And again, for those of you who this is new territory for you, don't be shy about reaching out to us through our website. That is something that we do often and are happy to do, is make connections and help you think through that work. Next question for Elena. What plans are in place to help increase charging stations and clean transportation in underserved communities?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So NEVI, the NEVI program is covered under the Federal Justice 40 initiative, which just means that each of the state plans from the state DOTs includes a description of how each state intends to deliver the benefits of EV charging investments to disadvantaged communities. And in terms of other ways that joint office investments can benefit underserved communities, the charging and fueling infrastructure program does include a multimodal hub category. So there are CFI awardees, including several that were announced with today's awards, that are looking at providing electrification or like electric charging to different modes. And yeah, I'm happy to drop the CJS tool in the chat. So the CJS tool is it's the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool. It's from the Council on Environmental Quality, and it's the authoritative tool for purposes of NEVI for defining disadvantaged communities.
Thank you. Lauren, a question for you. Do you have examples of communities with strong EV readiness plans and EV charging plans? What are those really shining best practice plans that are out there, whether they've used the playbook or been through the cohort process? What are the ones you point to when someone asks for a good model?
Yeah, so I don't have specific names off the top of my head, but what I can say is the EV charging infrastructure playbook itself has some really great examples under the additional resources subheader. So specifically in module 1, we're in the planning module, there are some example plans that are in there at both the local government, the county level, even the regional level. So looking at councils of governments, regional planning organizations. So there's some really good examples there of what you might want to include at different scales as well. Definitely encourage you to dig around on the tool and look at those additional resources when you're looking for example plans. We pulled some of the ones that we thought would provide, the most sort of quality example for you to pull from.
Great, thank you. And a question that came in here about what is the Joint Office doing to support zero emission buses? Let me just share my screen here so everyone can be able to capture this. So we do a lot actually to support transit and electric school buses. When we say we want a world where everyone can ride and drive electric, we mean it as well. We are intentional about leading with ride there. One of the programs that we offer, one of the projects that I work on, is helping to support transit providers and school districts with getting off the ground the similar sort of strategy and playbook, if you will, to transition their fleet. So for those of you who have your phone handy, if you want to take a screenshot or if you just want to go to the link there, if in your community, your transit agency or your school district has not begun planning for transitioning their fleets, we're here to assist them with that work. We have in-kind planning resources available to support that effort. We also have, similar to our community strategy here, we have a host of resources and webinars and toolkits to help with that work. So do reach out about that. Do let your transit providers in your school district know about that. Kaylin, another question for you here. Will you be adding more modules in the future?
Yeah, good question. So at this time, we do not have any plans to add more modules, but beyond the modules 1 through 8 that are currently in there. However, we would really love your guys' feedback on the playbook or specific modules or resources or activities. So if you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback about the playbook or the content within it, please reach out. So I think Jeff went through a couple ways to get a hold of us in the beginning, but I'll just recap those really quickly. So first, on the playbook itself, I think it is up, but we are adding a comments box on the playbook itself. So if you're on that page, you can click on that and submit a comment. If that's not up now, it should be soon. You can also reach us through the contact us form on the Joint Office website. And you can also email us directly at jocommunityta@nrel.gov, and I'll put that in the chat. So we want to hear from you guys about the playbook or any questions related to it. If you have a question about planning that's not answered in the playbook, or you're having trouble finding a resource, please reach out to us. That's our job. We can help you research that and get you the information to hopefully answer your questions.
Thanks, Caitlin. And then I'm gonna combine a few questions here that came in. I think they're somewhat related. How can I position my permit company to be a progressive EV charging station? What are we doing to help support, and what's some model examples for make ready programming? Caitlin, Lauren, are you able to help answer those? Because I think that's a big component when we get into the permitting office, when you get into the zoning offices. Brian, what are your examples or your lessons learned there in working with those parts of your county government to support that work?
A couple of topics there you touched on. So one of them is, I know the importance of engaging and working with your utility, you know, and that gets at some of the make ready programs. I believe Module Tool, the engagement section, has some really great resources related to that, including a video from a utility on how to engage with them, as well as some guiding questions at that. So be sure to take a look at that if you're new to this space. For permitting and zoning information, again, we have a module on that. And I think a good place to look is kind of referencing zoning ordinances or permitting processes from other communities. I know several regions and states even have done a really thorough review of permitting processes and ways to streamline that. I think that was it CARB or out of California, they did a big review of that, and maybe New York, some big processes to make sure that's streamlined and consistent throughout the state, or ways that counties or cities could adopt those. So definitely check out those modules and resources to see what's being done elsewhere, or maybe even being done in your state. Potentially there's some efforts in place that you could get up to speed on or support. Beyond that, I don't know, Lauren or Brian, if you wanted to add any information related
Brian,
to this question.
I'd love it if you could add some color there, how you worked with your permitting office. I know those zoning desks can be tricky at times. How did that process go, both in terms of getting them up to speed of what you were trying to achieve and getting those permits issued?
Yeah, so we haven't gotten to the permitting stage of our proposed projects yet, but we have been working through our zero emission vehicle plan on identifying, you know, things that we can do with our permitting process to streamline it. We have a lot of great resources for companies that want to apply for an EV charging, have an EV charging project in Montgomery County. It requires both a commercial, on the commercial side, both a commercial construction permit as well as electrical permit, reviewed by 2 different disciplines. But there's an opportunity to have a pre-designed consultation with our permitting department, as well as we have a really great step-by-step guide for how the permitting process works. One thing that, you know, we just got to make sure is that you follow the process, because anytime that you stray from the process as a contractor, it's going to just introduce more delays. But we're looking at ways to have a little bit more clarity on what will be required, specifically around ADA requirements as it relates to public charging infrastructure. The ADA applies when it comes to public charging infrastructure, and making sure people are aware of these, making sure people who have projects know what the process is going to be, what it's going to cost. So we're trying to include those in our messaging and our education around this. I'm not sure if that addressed all the aspects of the question, but that's what we're doing right now in the county for permitting.
No, I appreciate that. And if you need assistance, Brian, you know who to come to and where to go for that assistance in getting those best practices. I think we got time for one last question, and I will take a stab at it, but Caitlin, others, feel free to chime in if I miss anything. Many communities are already overburdened and lacking capacity if they are very rural. I mean, CEV charging is something they should or can take on. How does the Joint Office of Public Communities examine EV charging is something a community should look into? I think, if you look at the winning grantees of this latest round of the charging and fueling infrastructure, even the past round, there's a lot of rural communities, there's a lot of tribal communities in there. And we have tailored resources specifically working towards those communities. We also partner closely here at USDOT with our rural office, our routes team, to make sure that what we're discussing is part and parcel to what they're doing as well. We've hosted workshops, webinars. We think electric transportation and EVs are really a good tool for GHG reduction for everyone who's driving a vehicle. So we have tailored resources to try to fit those needs. If you in your community, if you represent a rural community or you work with a rural community, do reach out. We're happy to engage them with the resources we have, or you can find it on those resources that were dropped in the chat. With that, I think we are at time. I want to thank everyone on the panel for joining us today, for your participation. I want to thank all of you who joined the webinar for listening in. If you need information, you can find us at driveelectric.gov and find links to everything that we discussed today. And we should be posting a recording of this webinar up soon. So if you want to send that to colleagues or other people in your field who may be interested, please do so. Thank you.